What would it be like to be the head of an ESG financial analysis team? You know, ESG, environmental, social, or corporate governance. Basically, it represents this form of responsible investing. You know, investing with values that we as citizens, think are good for the future. It's good for the planet, it's good for people. And this ESG movement has been taking shape over the last 20, 30 years and currently has over $30 trillion in global assets under its banner. So yeah, it's an area that's definitely developing within the financial systems, and it's starting to really, move forward in a lot of different ways, creating new opportunities for people that, one, have an interest in finance, but also want to be doing things the right way. So this episode, we've got this great guest line. Her name is Kelly Hirsch. She heads up her own team for this investment company, VCIM, and she's going to speak about this profession, in terms of how it sort of developed, what it's all about, roles, responsibilities. We also look at, the somewhat darker side of it all, some of the criticisms, greenwashing, what that means and what her perspectives are on it. We also look at, how analysts look at companies, how they evaluate companies, whether or not they fit under this ESG label or whether or not they're not doing the right things. So we'll have a look at those elements, and then also even technology, how that's shifting and changing the entire ESG movement. There's a bunch more contained within the full audio version, so I would encourage you to check out that. And you can do so wherever you access your podcasts. Just do that search for Life as a ... All right, well, why don't we get into things? Okay, well, it probably makes sense to start with a nuts and bolts perspective on the work of an ESG investment analyst. What do they do? What takes up their day? So here's a clip of Kelly explaining that.
I put most of the work we do in two main buckets. There's the, what I would call, it's quite broad, but I would call ESG analysis. Where it's really, looking at companies, looking at, looking over the portfolios, looking at ESG risks, evaluating, sort of how companies are managing, how they're exposed to the, sort of what their exposure is, are there opportunities, looking, holistically at the portfolios and their looking, let's say doing carbon footprinting, and then, but at the same time, it's hard, again, it bleeds into the second category. But then the second big piece of work would be shareholder engagement. Okay. And some people call it shareholder advocacy. It's done in different, there's different names for it. But it's effectively us, often, it can often come from that, ESG analysis work. But it'll be, sort of actually talking to companies, talking to senior leaders at companies, filing, well, maybe I may be getting into too much, I'll try to keep this high level here.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Just filing shareholder proposals, proxy voting, some of these things, it's really about engaging with company leadership and, the relevant individuals at companies on particular issues. Either it could be we've identified, sort of a conflict near a company's site, sort of with the local community. And so we'll reach out, to understand how the company's managing that. So that might be something that I'd be doing. But then also, we're also always looking to advocate for best practices as well. So it might be for instance, sort of a project I was working on, it's a multi-year project and it's continuing, where, shareholders, we have the right to file shareholder proposals with the companies that we hold, depending on the jurisdiction. It's generally a North American phenomenon, but you do see it in Europe as well a bit. And so we've actually been, we want to see Canadian companies start disclosing the CEO to median worker pay ratio. Okay. So that's something where, it's a lot of it's combination of a lot of research behind that to really sort of understand the issue. And so some of my days, spent researching, some of it spent coaching analysts on my team for, sort of their own research. Then, then having discussions about that research, and sort of what that actually means.
The thing that strikes me about all of this is the investigative aspect to it all. And I think that might be something that people might not necessarily fully grasp or understand before, say, listening to somebody like yourself explain it that way. Because I think maybe the stereotypical view would be like, okay, you're just analyzing companies, you're looking at a spreadsheet, you're looking at numbers, and you're making quick decisions. Maybe not quick, but relatively, quick decisions. But this seems to me, like the way you're spelling it out here, a lot more drawn out, a lot more in depth, having interviews with people, investigating things, and really trying to come up with conclusions to all of this, and then internally discussing a lot of dialogue on these topics. And certainly it makes all the sense in the world, again, as you lay it all out here. But I think it's something that would be lost on somebody who doesn't really fully understand what the job could be about. So I really, really like that insight. I think that's really quite valuable for anyone who's interested in this particular field. So
now this next clip represents an in the weeds look at this whole industry. What I came to learn are ESG based companies operate in different ways. I mean, this whole industry is still evolving, and there's different forms at which these companies are evolving into. So as a prospective employee who's interested in it, you might want to know some of these distinctions between how some of these companies actually operate. And here's a clip of Kelly explaining some of those points.
There is a big portion of the industry that really are just relying on, so you have like rating providers that, much like there's bond.
That was like what I was kind of thinking of how it would be done, but
so you have like, your bond rating providers. And so there are ESG rating providers, MSCI and Sustainalytics, two of some of the most well-known. And they'll come out with aggregate scores. And so that's what, like, a lot of people often you will see ESG investing done like that, just taking this aggregate score, putting that in. But I mean, like, for instance, we do access data from, sort of these providers, but for us, it's really looking at the analysis piece, because we really believe that rating piece that a lot of is labeled as ESG, you can't take a lot of these things, like you can't compare, like you can't put them into one.
You can't quantify everything, right? Is really what you're probably getting at here. There's certain things that, like, it's tough to put a number value to.
On Life as there is a segment called Pathways, and the aim is to uncover how professionals make their way, into their professions. And the story that Kelly shares was really interesting. And spoiler alert, it involves her undergrad degree in environmental science, but not any environmental science program. This one was a multidisciplinary approach. That meant she could try some different courses from several different areas. And I'll let Kelly tell you the rest of the story.
I would actually go back to, like, my finance story probably started in first year chemistry, where I don't know if other people do that, but, like, the titration, like, you have to put the drops and count the drops until they go like pink.
Right.
So I do that once, right? And then they're like, okay, so you're going to do that however many more times. In my head, I'm like, seriously? Like, it was that, like, moment of, I was like, seriously? I'm like, but I know how many drops. Like, it's always going to be this. Like, why would I keep doing that?
Yeah.
Like that. This is like, this already wasn't fun. Like, why not? I'm just sort of like, I'm dropping drops and doing this isn't. And that was when, that's where actually the interdisciplinary nature of the program was so helpful, because what I did find really interesting was more courses on, like, resource management, economics, policy, and, like, that side of the environment.
All right.
So rather than the direct, I realized early on the direct.
You weren't going to be in a lab.
No, I was not going to be in a lab. Like, that's just not where my interests lie. Like, my interest was very much more, I found it so much more interesting. Like, particularly, I mean, I ended up doing field research down there, like in the US Southwest, on water management. And, just looking at actually a lot of the human yes, it's a desert, but a lot of the human factors and the that whole interaction of all these different incentives and the way property rights are structured, that ends up incentivizing different behaviors.
I did want to address this notion of greenwashing, basically where companies are labeling themselves as ESG compliant, but in reality, they're still doing some things that could be considered fairly nefarious and aren't really in alignment with ESG principles. So here's a clip of Kelly speaking to that point.
Those are legitimate concerns on the greenwashing. I'm not going to say that that's not. That is, for sure. As in any emerging industry, and it's quite new in terms of, like you said, we can trace it back to the 70s, but effectively even sort of, around 2000 is about, and even then it was a pretty slow.
Yeah, relatively speaking, it's a short history we're talking about right now. So
yeah, exactly. And so I think we're really at that point where, it's going back, I don't have the years off the top of my head, but if you look at financial disclosures back in the day, before they were regulated, before there was sort of any standardization, anyone could you could put any figure out there to, hey, invest in my company, look at this stuff here. And I feel like ESG is really at that point.
I did find that portion of the talk on greenwashing to be really interesting. I came away with this impression that yes, a lot of companies are doing the right things, or at least they're attempting to do so. However, there are some companies out there that, not doing their best necessarily, but still labeling themselves as ESG compliant. And part of the reasons, Kelly does go on to explain, a bit of a spoiler alert here, it does involve issues like a lack of regulation, standardization, and just even a clear definition of what ESG truly is. But again, I would encourage you to check out the full audio version to get more on all of that. Now, this last clip that I'm going to show you in this highlights video is about this notion of technology and how it's truly shifting and changing ESG investment analysis. And this is something you probably want to know about if you had any interest within this field. So here's a clip once again of Kelly explaining this.
Part of the new technology we need, as part of the innovation we need, is to be able to measure different things properly. I'm looking right now trying to footprint the portfolios for their biodiversity impacts.
Right.
And I wouldn't say there's amazing data out there right now, but I think with a lot of technology can actually help that. We've seen it with water management where, it used to just kind of let's get some sprinklers out there. Whereas it's actually drip irrigation is a better system, that can actually with sensors that can tell, does the water, does this piece of ground need more water? And so I think in a sense, some of those developments will feed up into ESG. It's funny, it's not direct.
Evolving still, right? Yeah, it's all still evolving. As the tech evolves, that gets more refined. Well, then some of the data coming out associated with that is also fed into the system, which can add clarity ultimately, right?
Exactly.
All right. Well, I do think we are drawing to a close here for this video highlights portion of the talk. But as always, I would encourage you to go check out the full length audio version. And there's so much more covered within it. We get a deeper look at some of the roles and responsibilities of an ESG financial analyst. We also look at how the industry is moving forward in different ways. And also too, we even get a look at, Kelly's personal pursuits and how they sort of blend into the work that she does within ESG and how that actually really does help her make better, clear decisions. So again, you can find that wherever you access your podcast. Just do that search for Life as a ... And really quickly here, as always, I would encourage you to hit that like or subscribe button. It's the best way to help promote these ideas and get these, career possibilities in front of more people. So again, like or subscribe. All right, well, again, have a look for the next episode of Life as a. They come out on a weekly basis, and keep an eye open for it.